Welcome to the Lemkin Law Podcast, real talk on divorce and family law matters.
Welcome to the Lemkin Law Podcast, real talk on divorce and family law matters, where tough conversations meet real advocacy. Hollie Lemkin is a family law attorney and fierce defender of protective parents. If you're navigating a high-conflict divorce, custody battle, or feel like the system's not listening, you're not alone. This show is here to give you clarity, truth, and a little fire to keep going. Let's talk about what really happens behind the courtroom doors and how to fight back. I'm Heidi Mack, and today's episode is The Myth of the High Conflict Parent When Labels Hurt Good Moms. Thank you so much for joining us again, Holly. We appreciate your knowledge.
Oh, thank you. I enjoy being here.
Of course, of course. Well, Holly, let's get to it. Let us know here, what does the term high conflict parent actually mean in the legal world, and how is it typically used?
It's typically used in circumstances where you have one parent that is highly charged in their responses to the other parent and cannot focus on what's in the best interest of the children.
Then, so why do protective moms often get that labeled the high conflict parent when they're raising legitimate concerns?
Because sometimes they're mischaracterized as being high conflict when in reality what they're really doing is being protective or overprotective parents. And it gets labeled, oh, it's high conflict, or they're not rational, or they're not realistic, or something like that, when it's not what they're doing at all. They're trying to be the mama bear, the cub, the mom that's protecting her cubs.
Got it. Got it. So then, how do these early trauma responses or safety focused actions get mistaken for combative behavior then in court?
Usually it comes in the courtroom, unfortunately, is that the other parent who wants custody, who's not getting what they want, it's easier to throw out a label, which is inappropriately put on the other person, instead of sitting down and saying, gee, I wonder why they're doing that. What could I do as the other parent to ensure that we have a better conversation or a more productive conversation? There's always things that the other parent who's asking the questions can do to calm the situation, or to ask questions of the parent that's being labeled, inappropriately labeled, in a different way or a better way. And they don't take the effort or the time to do that.
So then, Holly, how does this label, how does it impact the parent's credibility or their custody rights in court?
Not well. If they can't overcome that and explain to the court what's happening so that the court gets it, and the court will see. The courts usually have a long history of looking at human behavior and human, responses to questions or situations, and being able to see if the label is being misused or inappropriately used. And a better lawyer for that party can easily write a declaration for that client explaining that to the court and saying, no, this isn't what I'm doing. I'm trying to protect my child, and refute the allegation that the other party's trying to label them with.
So in these matters, sometimes there's things like cases that could be considered high conflict. What's the distinction there between like a high conflict case and a high conflict parent?
High conflict case, I'm not sure. It's difficult to discern when you draw the line between high conflict case and high conflict parent. Usually people use that terminology interchangeably, and it really shouldn't be. The difference really is, do you have a situation that's causing the conflict, or do you have a personality that's causing the conflict? And that's usually the distinction. Most people don't usually stop to make that determination as to whether it's the first one I described or the second one, and they just get randomly labeled with being the high conflict parent, when in reality it could easily be the other party that's goading them into that. And so the party that's being labeled a high conflict parent needs to step back, take a breath. It's not fun to be labeled that way, but just take a breath and step back and say, wait a minute, Do I think I'm really acting that way? Is this in the best interest of my child? Is there a better way or a different way that I could respond that would refute that label?
Then what, with opposing counsel or even court appointed professionals, how are they weaponizing that label? Like how does that work in court?
If it's a mental health professional who's testifying in court, they should, if they're a competent mental health professional, be able to explain to the court that this party, the one that's getting the inappropriate label, isn't really the high conflict parent. They're just being labeled that way because it's an easy allegation to make to paint that parent in a poor light. So, a mental health professional can actually be your best friend if you can get them on your side from the beginning. And I think that's probably a good weapon for a high conflict parent, or at least one who's being labeled a high conflict parent, to work within the court system so that the court system goes, oh, I get this. He's trying to label her that, he being the father, is trying to label her that way so that she won't get what she wants and I'll get what I want. Um, and if you have a good mental health professional, they can refute that and say, no, that's not what's going on, Your Honor. This is really whatever the situation is, and describe it to the court.
Mhm. Then, so you were saying earlier, like when you're labeled that way to, kind of calm yourself and like look at it, look like take a step back. Is there in your advice something more that they can do in order to push back against it strategically?
Strategically, the best thing they can do is send follow up emails after an interaction between the two parents. Or if there's an interaction between, well, I wouldn't do this suggestion if it was just the parent and the child, but if there was two parents involved, actively involved, and they think that they've been wrongfully labeled, I would say the best thing to do is start making a paper trail. Send an email. Hey, I know you labeled me XYZ, but I disagree, and this is why. That's a very calm, very easy reproach for the parent who's being inappropriately labeled, and saying, these are the issues I have with the situation. I'd like to talk to you about it, and show the court and show the other side that you're trying to engage in an appropriate conversation over issues that relate to the children, because it's really, at the end of the day, it's really the children that matter, not the parents.
Mhm. So, we were talking about parents and, either side, but does does the gender bias, does that play into it as well?
I think there always is going to be gender bias, and there is gender bias in one party labeling another. Oh, look, she's just the word I'm thinking of. Um, Mother. She's the blankety blank mother. That's the way I'm going to leave it. But and that's a societal issue more so even than a family law issue. Well, there's deadbeat dads and there's cranky mothers. And that's just the way people like to label things. I think it's a poor substitute for really stepping back, looking at the totality of the circumstances, looking at how the children are responding to that parent or not, and looking at it through the eyes of the children. Because if the children are not responding appropriately to the parent that's being labeled the high conflict mother, um, then you've mislabeled that person, and you need to step back and figure out, hey, that person I've missed something here because the children don't respond the same way I do.
Yeah. Well, Holly, I mean, we're just scratching the surface here with this, and is there anything for our listeners, that you really want them to know about, this problem with this high conflict label before we head on out?
The best thing I would tell them is that it's an easy out to say, oh, they're the high conflict parent, they're the problem parent. The best phrase that's well worn is take a long hard look in the mirror at yourself.
It's very true. Well, thank you so much, Holly, for your knowledge. We can't wait for your next episodes as well.
Okay, I'm looking forward to it.
Sorry, I'll start again. And thank you for tuning in to the Lemkin Law Podcast, real talk on divorce and family law matters with Holly Lemkin. If you're a parent fighting for your child and feel like you've been mislabeled or misunderstood, know that you're not alone, and there are legal strategies that work. To connect with Holly, visit Lemkin Law, that is LEMKIN law.com. And if this episode gave you clarity or courage, be sure to like, subscribe, and leave a review so you don't miss Holly again. Thank you so much again, Holly. We appreciate it.
Thanks for watching. Be sure to hit that like and subscribe button and leave us a review in the comments.